So one of the things that I like to do frequently is take a deeper look at what we Zen students and we Zen teachers routinely do, or the chants that we recite so often routinely that they become rote. We stop really paying attention and we don't look deeper into what we're doing, like bowing, for example, or what we're chanting. At the monastery where I live, we chant the 4 great bodhisattva vows every day at the end of zazen at night and then after every Dharma talk. So this talk is about the 4 great bodhisattva vows, the 4 possible, impossible vows. The 4 vows are part of our lineage. The 6th ancestor in China, Huineng, wrote about them. So they probably date back to the 6th century and were derived from what is believed to be the oldest Buddhist manuscript in existence, the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines. And that very large text was the source of the Heart Sutra that we just chanted together. So condensed down into the Heart Sutra. So let's look at the words in the first line of the 4 great bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Or sometimes it's translated, free them or liberate them. Beings are numberless, I vow to free or liberate or save them. And when we do koan work, which I was trained in, we look at every word because each word has implications. So we could start with the word vow, I vow. We do a lot of work with vows in our particular sangha. It's the name of our monastery. And I've actually written a book that's a series of classes, can be used as a series of classes to find your own vow or your life purpose, or my husband calls it your heart's aspiration. Vows are a way to harness our life energy and direct it towards a beneficial purpose. Of course, people can have vows that are destructive vows too. We can look at the war in Ukraine right now. What is Putin's vow? So, but hopefully we who are practitioners are going to create beneficial vows. And vows also help remind us when we get distracted. We all know the phenomenon of sitting down to work on a particular task on the computer, and then you can divert it off into YouTube and news and Instagram and emails, and you wake up 30 minutes later and you go, like, why did I sit down at the computer? What was I supposed to be doing? So it's really easy to get diverted off now, especially with the enchantment of like all that appears on the computer. Shohaku Okumura, who is a long-term Zen teacher living in Indiana, wrote a book called Living by Vow. And he says, a bodhisattva is a person who lives by vow instead of by karma. As we grow up, we learn a system of preferences and values from the culture around us, which we use to evaluate the world and choose our actions. This is living by karma. In contrast, a bodhisattva lives by vow. Vow is like a magnet or a compass that shows us the direction towards awakening, towards the Buddha way. And I agree with him 100%. I often talk about a vow as a GPS device that when we get off course can gently direct us back to where we want to be in life, where we want to be going in life. Some vows we call inspired vows. For example, we have a physician who practices here, and when she was young, her family immigrated from Korea, and they were very, very poor, and they couldn't afford medical care. But at the church they went to, there was periodically a free clinic. And she got very sick with a fever and a sore throat, probably strep throat. And her parents took her to that clinic, and the doctor gave her antibiotics, which cured her pain in her throat. And she decided to become a doctor. And she's now an OBGYN doctor and a surgeon, a very skilled surgeon. But she's now recently become a practitioner because that wasn't enough. And she's encountered, as many healthcare professionals are now, a fair amount of suffering, her own suffering, as she cures other people's suffering. So some vows are inspired, some vows are inherited, like my husband, who's a Zen teacher, his parents built a very successful construction business and expected that he would take it over. He became a Zen teacher instead, which is quite different. But his sister took over this inherited vow and took over the construction business. So some vows are also reactive. So if you grew up in an alcoholic family, you may take a vow, I will never drink. Alcohol is such poison, it's so destructive. So there are all kinds of vows, and it's very interesting to look at the vows in our own life and where they came from. The first of the 4 Bodhisattva vows, beings are numberless. Let's look at numberless. Let's look at beings are numberless. So is that true? It depends on who you count as beings. Let's say human beings. Those are the people I'm going to work to save. So there are currently about 8 billion people in the world, with about 81 million more people added every year. So this speaks to the impossibility of this vow. How can we save 8 billion people? And the 81 million that will be added this year. Let's look at animals. When I came on Zoom, I saw a very cute curly-haired dog on Zoom, as we see often these days on Zoom. So let's say we want to look at dogs. How many dogs are in the world? Maybe we want to save dogs. Very admirable. Humane Society does that work all the time with animals. How many dogs are there? There are 80 million dogs in the world. How can we save dogs? Let's say monarch butterflies inspire us. Everybody has something that inspires them. Well, actually, we can't count the monarch butterflies. Too difficult. So they use a land area. They look at how much they cover their wintering site in Mexico to estimate how many butterflies, monarch butterflies they are and how they're doing. So for example, I would like to save monarch butterflies, and we have planted varieties of milkweed in our garden, but no monarchs came. And then I discovered, oh, we're not in their migration pathway. Maybe you are, and you can plant some milkweed in your garden to help feed the monarchs as they fly to Mexico. So in 2021, the monarch butterflies completely covered 7 acres of land in Mexico. So, there must be billions of monarch butterflies. Then we could add in honeybees, saving the honeybees who are now in trouble, or earthworms, or our favorite flower, tulips, or whatever our favorite species is. And then we could add in the billions of organisms that live in everyone's large intestine and not only help digest your food, but they also affect all aspects of our health. We're now considering them another organ in our body, this microbiome in our gut. They produce 90% of the serotonin in your body. And serotonin is the chemical that regulates mood. So they're responsible not only for our physical health, but actually for our mental health. So how do we save them? All of those beings that live inside of us. We're like a universe of organisms living inside of us. So beings are truly numberless. Truly numberless. We have to recognize that and the impossibility of saving them all if we go out and dedicate our life to one aspect of helping, which is wonderful. Can't save them all from suffering. Which is, the next question we have to ask, I vow to free them, to save them, to liberate them from what? From what? We have to be realistic. Can we save even another person from suffering? Is that possible? We read about suffering in the news each day. There was an article in the San Diego Union a few weeks ago, the San Diego newspaper. It was called, I Thought She Was Going to Kill Me. And there were 24 journalists who were assigned for 72 hours to spread out around San Diego County and to follow essentially the system that's designed to help relieve suffering, to follow clinicians, police, patients, relatives, ER doctors, jail guards, and 911 dispatchers to look at the human suffering in the county and what was the county doing to relieve it. So here's one of the stories. He'd been out driving when he spotted a homeless woman by a bus stop. He pulled over, hazard lights flashing to protect her from traffic. She's out of her mind, he said to the dispatcher when he called 911. The woman could be heard yelling in the background, her words unintelligible. Please hurry, the man said. He gave the woman's age, race, and clothing. What color is her hair? The dispatcher asked. It's full of dirt, he said. The man asked if any mental health clinicians were available. None were. Do you know her name, sir? The dispatcher asked. She's my daughter, he said. So how do we save even those who are closest to us from suffering? We really have to ask that question in our practice. So last week, my husband, Hogan, had a toothache. He had an abscess under his tooth. Could I help relieve his suffering? I could remind him to take analgesics. I could remind him to call and make an appointment with the dentist. In other words, I could nag him to get help with the pain he was feeling. But could I really help with his suffering? So here it's really important to distinguish between pain and suffering. To distinguish between the physical elements, the physical discomfort of our experience, and the mental and emotional components of our experience. Pain is related to the physical components of our experience, whereas suffering is related to the mental, emotional components, the sensations, the thoughts. So we have sensations, which we can call painful or pleasant, and then we have the thoughts about those sensations, and that's where suffering enters. So maybe something's hurting, throb, ouch. Maybe in our back, we have a backache. So there's the sensation of throb, ouch, tingling, heat, cold, whatever it is, versus what goes on in our mind. If this goes on any longer, I won't be able to bear this pain. I'm going to go crazy. What if this pain never goes away? We all know how our mind works with phenomenon. What if I have a tumor in my spine? What if it's cancer and I have to have an operation? What if the operation leaves me paralyzed? You can see yourself in a wheelchair. You can even feel like you're getting choked up because you're going to end up in a wheelchair, and then you have to find somebody to push you around, and you'll never be able to hike or surf or ski or dance again. And meanwhile, there's just throb, ouch. But our mind has added this thick layer of suffering to the phenomenon, the physical phenomenon of pain, or what I call strong, disagreeable sensation. Pain is such a loaded word. People often ask me why I left medicine after 40 years to work full-time as a Zen teacher. And I realized that in my medical work, I seldom had permission to address the real source of suffering, which is the mind. Modern medicine enables us to relieve the pain somewhat. And people think, well, if my physical pain goes away, I'll be okay. But all the aspirin or Tylenol or Advil or codeine or morphine in the world will not remove, will not cure the suffering that our mind produces. So there's an old motto in Zen work that pain is part of our life experience. That's what the Buddha said. Pain is part of our life experience, but suffering is optional. We will all suffer pain, but our practice enables us to work with the suffering and mitigate the suffering that our mind produces. That is the beauty of our practice. A number of years ago, Hogan and I attended a meeting of Western Buddhist teachers with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, India. And when we weren't meeting with His Holiness, we were these teachers from the three different basic traditions of Buddhism, from the Theravada tradition, the Zen tradition, and then the Vajrayana tradition, the Tibetan tradition. We would meet and we would talk about our issues. And Mahagosananda was a person who was also invited and attended. And he would come sit with us Western Buddhist teachers from Europe and from the US in our meeting. Mahagosananda was the head of Cambodian Buddhism. He happened to be out of the country when Cambodia was taken over by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. And during that era, 1.5 to 2 million people in Cambodia were killed. And almost all of the monks and nuns in Cambodia were murdered. So Mahagosananda couldn't return during that time, during those years. But when he finally returned, he became a kind of shining light in Cambodia, a light of hope. And he would do things like lead villagers who had not been able to visit an adjacent village because the land was strewn with landmines. So for years, they hadn't been able to see their friends or their relatives in an adjacent village. And he would lead them. He would be at the head of a march going to an adjacent village to help free people from the prison, one of the prisons they had been in. So he sat on the couch, and he wears bright orange robes because he's a Theravada monk. So he was like this kind of lighted, almost like a jack-o'-lantern. He just is a bright light. And he was sitting on the couch quietly, meditating, as we Westerners chatted about our issues, about students not following our advice, and students doing Dharma shopping and going to, what I call the delicatessen approach. One retreat there and another retreat there, and teaching by such and such person online, and not really settling down into deep practice, or how much we were not paid to do Dharma work, or all kinds of first world problems. And then periodically somebody would remember that Mahagosananda was there, and they would say, "Oh, Reverend Mahagosananda, well, do you have anything to say about this?" And he would open his eyes from meditating and he would say this: "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the relief of suffering. Suffering and the relief of suffering." And then he would close his eyes and go back into meditating. So maybe during our 2.5 hour meeting, we asked him 4 times to comment on what we were talking about. And he would say just that: "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the relief of suffering," which is exactly what the Buddha taught. Exactly what the Buddha taught. He looked at what is the problem in the world: suffering. Is there a way out of suffering? And that was his koan. So I am 78 years old soon, and I have a limited time left to live and to teach. So the question is, in this limited time, 10 years if I'm lucky, what should I teach? But this phrase of Mahagosananda's keeps coming back to me: suffering and the relief of suffering, the Buddha's essential koan. How did the Buddha solve this issue of human suffering? He examined his own suffering, how it arises, how to mitigate it, and how to end it. And those are the 4 Noble Truths. Our practice, if done earnestly, can take us right down into the machinery, a deep dive into how we manufacture suffering. So, for example, some mornings we get up and sit at about 4:20 at the monastery for a couple of hours. And some mornings my body hurts. And towards the end of the week, I kind of run out of energy. And if I use my hands a lot to garden or type on the computer a lot, my hands hurt. And some mornings I sit there and I discover that my mind is crabby. So during morning sitting, I examine what's occurring. So this is making a diagnosis. What's wrong here? What's going on here? And I almost always do the 4 foundations of mindfulness. in the morning. So that involves a body scan. The body as your body, scanning through the body for all those sensations in the body. And then discovering any extra holding or tension and letting it soften. So that takes me maybe 20 minutes. So I did a body scan. And interestingly, I always find when I do a body scan, it's like taking aspirin. The pain dissipated in my body. It's so interesting to notice that when we avoid something, it gets worse. You know the phrase, resistance leads to persistence. But when we turn around and plunge into it, and we take it apart into its component parts, something happens. The bits and pieces become disconnected. The glue that holds them together dissolves. So what is that glue? What is that glue that holds what we call myself together? It's I, me, and mine. I, me, and mine. This is my suffering. This is my pain. I'm totally focused on my pain. Not realizing that all around us, sometimes I have, when people come in for their first retreat, beginner's mind retreat, at the end I have them raise their hands. How many people experienced some discomfort or pain while they were sitting? And everybody raises their hand, and people look around and they're just amazed, like they thought they were the only one who was experiencing pain when they were sitting. So it's quite a revelation to realize everyone experiences pain. If you have a body, you experience pain. So to look into that pain rather than avoid it, rather than add suffering to it, is part of the magic of our practice. My pain, it becomes heavier. It's my predicament. It becomes heavier than if it's, oh, here's some unpleasant sensation. What will I do with them? So having taken care of my mind in the morning, then I have to examine, taking care of my body, then I have to examine the crabbiness of my mind. Why is my mind cranky? And that really involves becoming aware of the feeling tone, the underlying feeling tone. And you can see that best in the morning. You get up in the morning, you check, what is the feeling tone this morning? Is it positive, which I characterize as, kind of like, I wonder what the day will bring. Or even a little bit of anticipation. Oh, great, we're going to do the Buddha's birthday today. So that's a positive feeling tone, and then we add words to it. Or is it negative? We wake up with the feeling tone of, which we could call dread or anxiety. And then the mind goes, well, why do I feel that way? Oh, that's because, yesterday somebody ignored me, and maybe they don't like me, and it's my boss, and maybe they want to fire me, maybe they're angry at me, and I don't, blah, 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 blah. Off the mind goes. That's adding suffering. That's adding suffering to the simple phenomenon of a feeling tone, which is negative. Or is it neutral? So I characterize that as, let's see, I don't know what's going to happen. So this feeling tone is the essential ingredients in emotion. Feeling tone plus thoughts creates emotion. So in Buddhism, emotion is an epiphenomenon. It's not inherent to us. It's the phenomenon of emotions plus thoughts. Like the example I gave of, it's the combination of body sensations plus thoughts. So for example, you wake up in the morning and you feel sore. So that can turn towards positive or negative. So it could be negative, like, oh no, I'm getting old and my body is just falling apart, and why do I hurt in the morning after I had a night's rest? And so that's negative feeling tone towards simple body discomfort. And then off we go. And then it could be positive. So we could wake up in the morning sore, and we think, why am I sore? The mind doesn't like things to happen without a reason, so it's always trying to figure out the reason. Why am I sore? Oh, I know. I did that workout yesterday. I did more sit-ups than I ever do. Or I was on the rowing machine, or I took a long walk, or took a long hike. Oh, I know I'm sore because of that. But that's great, because that means, my muscles are getting toned up. and I'm getting stronger and more fit and more healthy. So that's like the positive feeling tone, and then all the positive thoughts. They come from the simple sensation of the sore body. So you may have heard of the 5 aggregates. They're the building blocks of what goes on in our mind. So it starts with, this is how Buddhism takes apart how we are. So we start with sensation. So that would be the sensation of a sore body. And then comes the feeling tone, and that's very hard to catch, but it's really worthwhile in your practice to try to check once in a while, what's my feeling tone, especially first thing in the morning. So feeling tone is either positive, negative, or neutral. So sensation is just sensation, body sensation, let's say soreness. Feeling tone is positive, negative, or neutral. And then comes perception. Then comes, oh, this is soreness in my body. Oh. Then comes formation. Oh, this is bad. This is good. This is a result of exercise. This is a result of getting old and stiff. And then consciousness. Then we form the whole thing into a big package, and off we go. So I have found that working with that, and this is part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. First is body as body. Second is feelings as feelings. And it means the feeling tone. So practice gives us a choice. That's the miracle of practice. If I can add suffering, like my mind is cranky in the morning and my body is sore, I can add a lot of suffering to that because my mind wants to know why. The mind doesn't like things to happen without an apparent cause. So my mind could go off into, oh, my body is sore because, but why is that? My parents didn't have arthritis. How come I have arthritis? I didn't get enough sleep. Oh, I'm worried about this or that. And I pile on grievances, and I can carry my crabbiness into the day. Or I could clear my mind. I can assess the feeling tone, and I can adjust it. And then I can set myself up and everyone around me that I encounter for a different kind of day. So let's say we have a negative feeling tone or negative sensations in our body, let's call them, how to adjust them. So this is an exercise I love to do with myself and also my students. So if each one of you would think of a problem in your life, something that is heavy and kind of weighs on you, maybe when you're meditating, there it is. It comes up like, I gotta solve this problem. And it could be in your own personal life, in the life of people that you love or care about, or it could be a world problem. So bring that up and just see how that feels in the body. Thinking about that problem. And now silently say in your mind, no, no, no. Like this is a bad problem. I want this to go away. No, no, no. Like you're pushing it away. No, no, no. Just silently, no, no, no. Oh, I don't like this. No. Now stop and switch to saying yes. Silently inside. Yes, yes, yes. As you hold this problem in your mind, yes. Now a little bit of a smile. Just maybe turning up the corners of your mouth a little bit. And see how you hold this problem now. And now, if you give a nice big grin, like really nice big grin. Now laugh. Ha, 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 ha. Could be ha, ha, ha. So what happens? What happens when you, in your body and mind, when you go back to that problem? Your body, heart, and mind. You see how it changes? You see how the body and mind can work together to mitigate suffering. And we all know if we were really having a problem, we were really grumpy and upset. If the fire alarm rang, we all had to run outside, our state of mind would change instantly. Or if we were being really crabby and thinking about all of our problems, and the phone rang and we answered it and they said, oh, you've won the lottery and you have $500,000 coming to you, our state of mind would change immediately. So we know it's possible. And we know from the exercise that we just did that it's possible. So this is the medicine of our practice. It's the most amazing medicine. It really works. So can we save ourselves from suffering? Yeah, the practice enables us to do that. Next, we look at beings are numberless. I vow to save them from what? So we've been donating to relief efforts in Ukraine. And we've been sponsoring 2 Venezuelan refugee families. Our Sangha has done that. It's wonderful to do that. But do those donations of food, clothing, and so on relieve the suffering, the long-term suffering that those people will encounter in their minds and hearts in the rest of their life? No. So we can apply temporary relief of suffering. It's like over-the-counter remedies. It's wonderful to help people. But can we really relieve their long-term suffering? That's a really important question to ask. What is this? I vow to save them from suffering. My Dharma sister, Joko Beck, did a radical rewrite of the 4 vows. So here's how she rewrote them. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. And she said, practice can be stated very simply. It's moving from a life of hurting myself and others to a life of not hurting myself and others. So let's look at the 4 Bodhisattva vows. And this is one of the ways I like to link them all together. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them from what? From me, from my suffering. The world is full of suffering. And when we suffer less, there's less suffering in the world. I call this the algebra of suffering. If there's n amount of suffering in the world, and I'm not suffering because of it, not only can I then work better to relieve other people's suffering or wherever my place is in the world, if I'm not suffering, I'm free to do the work that I need to do in my life. So, but if I suffer because of the suffering in the world, that's n+1 suffering. So I've added to the suffering of the world. That's not our goal. Our goal is to reduce the suffering in the world, starting with the one person we can change, who is ourselves. So just that work, n-1 suffering in the world, is amazing. Amazing. And all the people around the world who are practicing to do just that. It's wonderful. So right now we have a mindful medicine group of physicians and nurses and nurse practitioners and therapists who are working to relieve the suffering of other people. They can help other people learn ways to end their own suffering. That's what Zen teachers do. We can help people learn to end your own suffering. But we can't do it for you. And doctors can't do it either. They can mitigate the pain using medications or surgery, but they can't relieve the suffering that goes along with it. So we can, in the medical field, we sometimes have people who have cancer who are blissful and living their last weeks or days or months just enjoying every moment of life. And they're so grateful to have that time. And then we can have people who, were rear-ended in a long traffic jam and have a sore neck, and they're so bitter and angry, and they're going to sue people, and is their neck ever going to get better? And they're suffering because of some discomfort in their neck, not caused by somebody who intended to do that. So the world is full of suffering, and when we suffer less, there's less suffering in the world. Then we keep practicing. When we keep practicing to diagnose and treat our own suffering, then we don't spread our suffering to others. And when we don't spread our own suffering to other people, and when we support each other in learning how to end our own suffering, relieve our own suffering, this is what a Sangha does. And we do that for decades, then there is a lot less suffering in the world. So here's how I like to link the four great Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them from what? From my delusions, which are inexhaustible. And I vow to end them. How? By entering the manifold Dharma gates and thus following the Buddha way. So to me, the four great Bodhisattva vows, beings are numberless. I vow to free them or save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. That's the way we say our vows here. Everybody has a different translation. But fundamentally, they're all linked together. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them from my delusions, which are inexhaustible. And I vow to put an end to them, to see them clearly and put an end to them by entering the manifold Dharma gates and thus following the Buddha way and embodying the Buddha way. So I encourage you to plunge into the four Bodhisattva vows and use them in your life. Recognize suffering in your life and use this most wonderful medicine that the Buddha called the great healer or the great doctor gave us to diagnose our own suffering and then to use our practice to mitigate it and ultimately to end it. And when we do that, even part of the time, even with some of our issues, it makes such a huge difference in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Roshi?
Yeah, please ask anything. Doesn't even have to do with the four Bodhisattva vows. It can be anything. Often you think, oh, I won't ask that question because that sounds stupid, but it's too basic. But when you ask a question, often it really helps other people who are afraid to ask that question.
Yeah, I guess I'll offer a comment. First of all, thank you for that. It was a wonderful talk. I really enjoy it because it's so easy to get caught up in the suffering. My mother has dementia. I know everybody's like, yes, Vicki, we know. Because I talk about it all the time, that, to go in there and to a dementia facility and see all that suffering, it's easy to get overwhelmed by it instead of, like you said, reframing it to, I want to enjoy my mom as she is now. She's nothing like the woman that raised me. She's nothing like the friend that I have as an adult. She's almost like my child now. So I'm trying to enjoy her as she is now.
Exactly. Yes. So you're practicing with reality then, and not a fantasy. You're practicing with the reality of this person in front of me, and not all the, oh, if only this had happened and that had happened and she didn't have the gene for dementia and will I get dementia? And all of that is extra and just added suffering.
It does happen.
There's what you're facing is tough. My mother took care of her mother when she had dementia. And I gave her a book, this is long ago, called The 72-Hour Day, I think it was called, which is for caretakers of people with dementia. Because it's a long day. It's a lot of work. Even being there for a few hours, as you know. Because we have this idea of who this was, and it's not that person, as you said, anymore. So to adjust to that person, we had one of our students was working in a home with people with dementia, and there was this one woman who refused to eat, and the staff didn't know what to do with her. And so our student figured something out, which was if you put something in a spoon and moved it towards her, she would be afraid, she would move back. I don't like that, she would say. And then our student said, no, sweetheart, these are peaches. You love peaches. And then the woman would say, I do. And she would give her a spoonful of peaches, and she would chew them and eat them. And then the next spoonful, the same reaction, because she had forgotten what this all was all about, right? So here comes the next, and she would say, these are peaches. You love peaches. And then she would open her mouth and she would eat. So she figured out what the fear was and how to mitigate the fear. Seems like it's so small, but it was so helpful to all the staff. If only the staff. And it helped nourish this woman as long as she wanted to be nourished.
This is Pam, and I really appreciated the little mental exercise that we went through, because once we switched the words to yes, I was just really struck by all of a sudden there was compassion there.
Mm.
Compassion just in saying yes, and then adding the smile is just like, yes, this is the way it is.
That's the way it is. That's right.
It was a really interesting change of turning around things. So thank you.
Did anybody else have an experience with that exercise? Yes, I see a hand, please.
I actually wanted to comment and thank you for that because so I do mental health therapy, and it's actually the exercise part of like laughing is like something that I do often with trauma responses because your body doesn't know the difference between a real laugh and a fake laugh.
Yes.
So like I do that often when I'm like in a terrible mood, and I'm like, well, figure it out. You gotta go in there and you gotta like facilitate change or be in a more joyful space. But I think what I really appreciated about that exercise is what I've never thought of is how usually it's like I'm grumpy about something and then I just sit in my car for a while and I'm like, I laugh, but I don't actually like imagine the thing that I'm angry with. And so like putting those two things together was a very like helpful thing because I didn't realize like how much that helped change my perspective on the issue that I was having versus just changing the frequency and the energy. And I think that's very important because we walk around like associating like negative things with a certain problem. And so that like, like even just like the colors for me, like it was like dark and heavy when I was thinking about like the problem, but like when I said yes, it like got like lighter. And like I saw imagery of like the problem changing like for the better. And so I thought that was a very helpful way of connecting the two. So I want to thank you for that.
Yes, wonderful comment. It's so true. I don't know if you've heard of laughter yoga, but it's a whole practice of laughing that it started in India and it has spread around the world. And so you intentionally start laughing, and we would call it fake laughing at the beginning, right? We've done it here at the monastery. And so you just start with ha, 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 ha. But then pretty soon, somebody's laughing for real. And then that catches. And then people start really, it just, as you mentioned, it just transforms what you're holding in your mind. And then, some people say, well, we shouldn't laugh at the suffering in the world. But as you mentioned, if we're really going to help with the suffering in the world, we have to have at least a place of equanimity. And because we, I don't know about you, but when I read the news in the morning, it doesn't help my state of mind because they know that, the people who produce the news know that the alarming news is what we're going to read. The negative news, all the problems in the world, that's what attracts our mind, because our mind says, oh, that, those things are okay. I don't have to worry about them. But here are the things I have to worry about. So our mind can get obsessed with problems, not only our own, but then the news pours all the problems of the whole world into our hearts and minds. And that's really hard. So first, a media fast, don't watch the news all day long, is really helpful in how much suffering you input into your mind. But then also this antidote that you were just describing of even sitting in your car and laughing. That's just a wonderful practice. And it changes the whole body, not just, and as you saw, your mind also transforms how your mind holds the problem. Because we know the Buddha was very clear, and it's been all of our experience, that anger produces anger. Anger begets anger. And if we go towards a problem with anger, then our, quote, opponents are just going to get angrier. We've seen it in our political climate, right? But if we go towards a problem with equanimity and compassion, as Pam mentioned, and a broader, more open way of being in the world with all the world's problems, that by itself is huge help to the world. And we're much more likely to accomplish something positive wherever we work, wherever our piece is in the jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't matter. Like relieving suffering. So one of the examples I give is we have once a week garbage pickup at the monastery, and we have a big dumpster because we have a lot of retreats and so on. And so, man, if that guy doesn't come for a few weeks, we're going to be suffering. Like in Paris during the strikes, the garbage just mounts up. There are rats, there are disease, and so on. So I go out and thank him every time I see him for doing this wonderful work for us. That's bodhisattva work.
Hi, Chosen. This is Mjoren.
Hi, Mjoren.
How are you? It's great to see you. I think the thing that comes up for me is, first of all, my gratitude for this talk and the reminder that it starts with me. Because one thing that happens in my daily life that I contend with is that my vows turn into like a to-do list. So vowing to, save the dishes from being dirty and being hungry, and then all of a sudden it's all the do's. And then it's like I'm a hamster in a wheel, and then I'm suffering because it's like, no. And so, what's that?
Pass fail, yeah.
Yeah, pass. So it is just really important to hear you speak about how it just is this moment right here, and we have a choice how we greet it, and then just go to the next thing, whatever it is.
Exactly. And then just watch your mind pile on suffering. Recognize it and let it go.
I have a quick question. This is Sarah, and
Hi, Sarah.
and thank you so much for your talk. And I am currently in pursuing my master's degree in social work, and so this really resonates. And like it's even like self-care, like it resonates. Self-care is literally written into like the code of ethics, because obviously if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be effective at what you're doing. And but also we talk a lot about boundaries, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, with the vow, I totally, as it's like an orienting, kind of like how we're orienting our lives and directing our energy, like what we're directing it towards. But can you talk a little bit about the practice of having a healthy boundaries if you are in a helping position, and what that look like?
Yes. Currently, there's a dialogue in the literature about the difference between empathy and compassion. And those two words have been used pretty much synonymously for ages in the literature about therapy and medicine and so on. But there's a movement, the mindful self-compassion movement, which at first I was kind of like, yeah, they're just co-opting some Buddhist principles. But the research on the mindful self-compassion work is very strong, very, very strong. It's very helpful. So this is taking care of yourself so that you can care for others. However you care for others, we all care for others in our lives. So now they're distinguishing empathy and compassion. So empathy, they're describing as over-identification with this pain and suffering of others so that we also suffer. Whereas compassion is a much broader holding of our own suffering, their suffering, the suffering in the world, but we're not sucked into their suffering. And in the direct helping professions like medicine, healthcare professions and therapy and social work, and first responders also, very important to remember, they do have a lot of suffering. It's very easy it's hard to clear out all the human suffering that you see and all the scenes that you have seen and all the things you have heard. It's very hard to clear it completely out. That's where practice to me is a lifesaver, because you have the ability to do some clearing. Let's say at the end of the day, working with clients or working wherever you work in the realm of suffering. I mean, even if you work, as a checkout clerk, you encounter people who are suffering. And does that affect you? Or can you, try to just be cheerful with them and then let it go? So empathy is over-identification, and it ends up that we're suffering because of other people's suffering. That's the current thought about it. Whereas compassion is very broad. But to me, when you're working with people and you have an open heart working with people, it's not a one-way channel. You're not just being compassionate with them, you're also taking in their suffering, and there's often a residue. And that's where practice can be really helpful after years of working with clients or patients who are suffering. There's a residue, and that's where practice can really help us clear that out so we can begin fresh. But even more important is compassion towards ourselves. And that's what the mindful self-compassion training is directly working with, that we just give and give and give, but we're not taking care of ourselves. So there are three basic elements to mindful self-compassion. The first is mindfulness makes us aware when we're suffering. So it's the recognizing, I am now suffering. Because if we don't recognize it, we can't do anything about it, right? So the first phrase is, this is a moment of suffering. This is a time of suffering. I am suffering. So that's number one, recognizing that we're suffering. Number two is widening it from our little compartment of suffering out into what they call common humanity, that all human beings will experience suffering in their world. So let's say I have a headache. I can recognize the headache. I'm suffering because of it. And then I widen out into all the people in the world who right now have a headache and are suffering because of it. And that's very helpful to realize this is a shared aspect of being a human being. And then the third element, which is really important, comes back to ourself, because we're the person who knows the best what's going on in our body, heart, and mind. And we're the person, really the only person who can ultimately work with it. So the third is, I am here for you. And you touch yourself in the way that a friend or someone who cares about you, loves you, would touch yourself. So you see people these days often doing this, but if you're in a meeting at work, you're not going to do that. You're not going to go like, oh, poor me. So it can be unobtrusive. It can just be, I'm going to show you, but you can just, touch your arm, quietly pat your arm under the table. Or you can put your hands together as if a good friend is holding your hand under the table. or you can like cross your arms like this and give, and that's a little hug for yourself. Don't be obvious, but just like somebody who's crossing their arms and thinking maybe in the meeting. So you can do all these things subtly, but you touch yourself as a good friend would. We have a therapist, he's retired now in our Sangha, and he had a terrible inner critic and a terrible upbringing. And he often, when he starts to suffer because of what his mind is telling him, he'll just do this. He'll go, "Oh, sweetheart, this hurts, but it's okay. I'm here for you." So he's overt about it, but usually we have to be more subtle about it. So we just touch ourselves in a kind way and then say, "I'm here for you. I will always be here for you." And that's so important because the part of us that suffers is a small child, is a small frightened child. And you can see that in dementia. You mentioned working with dementia. The suffering is a small child who's bewildered because they don't know what's going on in the world. It's so confusing. And a lot of our suffering began when we were children and then has been carried forward through things like the inner critic. So to recognize there's a young, very young being in there that's suffering, and to comfort that being and saying, "I'm here for you." And that's the beauty of practice, is we can be present with our own suffering and we can mitigate our own suffering. So the 3 steps are: this is a moment of suffering. 2, this is common to all humankind, so spreading out our awareness. And 3, touching yourself kindly. "I'm here for you. I'll always be here for you." And then if you want to laugh, in your car, that's great, because you know that has the power to change your mood. And when you laugh, if a child is like, "Oh, I'm hurting so much, my knee hurts, I fell down, I'm suffering," and you can get them to laugh about something, it cures the whole thing. So laughter is really potent. Thank you for your questions. Good question.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this talk.
You're very welcome.
And I have we'll do the closing chant, and then I have a few announcements, and then we'll put our cushions back and bow out. The many beings are numberless, vowing to carry them across.
The many beings
are numberless, vowing to carry them across.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all.
Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Announcements. First, we'll have tea and conversation. Afterward, we'll have a short one. We have a word practice today for those who can stay and don't need to run off and have Mother's Day somewhere. Happy Mother's Day, by the way. And then later this week, If anybody wants to help in the garden during the week, just contact me and we'll set up a time, because there's lots of garden work to do. Friday, we have a photographer in the afternoon. So I sent out an email to some of you. If you can join us in the afternoon for that, that would be good. And then at 4 to 5, the people who are sewing, Rakasus, will have a little sewing session. And that'll be followed in the evening by the moon ceremony. It's Daishin will be here this weekend, of course, for all of that. And then we have Zazen Kai on Saturday. So if you're interested in that, you can separate it out into 90-minute sections and come for any of those. So you can sign up on the website if you'd like to. What else, Tara?
That's a good.
That's a good.
That's, yeah.
Okay,
Some good stuff there.
That's a good.
That's
so good. All right, let's put our cushions back and then we can bow out.
Okay.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
The black one. Thank you.